There we go. Sorry we had to restart it, guys. I didn't realize some of the other videos that I did. I hadn't realized until here recently. I kept accidentally making them private, which is why not a lot of people were able to actually join in. And I just started putting them on public, and I realized a little bit too late as I was talking that this one was also set to private. So I had to restart it so that I can open it up to public real quick. But to start over real quick. Today's video was delayed. I'm also trying to figure out different things that I can do aside from just Facebook. If y'all remember, we talked about how I put some of them up on YouTube just to kind of see how YouTube would work. Because I want this to actually be a thing. And I really like the idea of making this kind of like a podcast and video type thing. It's really, really fun to do. YouTube wasn't really working out. It doesn't have a name right now because I took it down. It really just wasn't working. And I got tired of YouTube constantly sending me emails about the videos. So took it down, and I'm looking at some other avenues that I could post these to make it more of a podcast instead of just Facebook. But another reason, let me turn buzz off. There we go. So it won't vibrate on you guys. Another reason was just so I could figure out some really good topics going forward. But I'm going to keep trying to think of some more avenues other than just Facebook Live. I'm going to keep doing Facebook Live. But I really want another place that I can put these and another place I can do them aside from just Facebook. Just so that way I could do more videos, visit older topics that we've already covered, stuff like that. But today's video, the beginning of it, we're going to have the normal Q&A, answering some questions that people left me. And obviously, while I'm answering questions, if y'all have any that you want me to answer before we get into today's topic, feel free to toss them in the chat. The first question we had, and this question is part of the reason I wanted to do today's topic. But people keep asking me what kind of teas that I'm drinking in each video. So for now on, if I'm drinking tea during a video, just so I don't keep getting messages about it, I'm going to say exactly what kind I'm drinking. And today's tea is oolong, peach, and ginger tea. It's a really, really good blend if you like kind of that spice. Really, really good blend. Not very aromatic, but it's pretty good. The second question, and for this question that I've gotten, I got it from two different people, worded differently. But I'm going to go ahead and read how they asked it and then kind of talk about my ideas for these questions going forward. But basically what they asked was, in a lot of my videos, I've covered multiple cultures. And the different cultures are spread out. But in each video, I always mention that they have these similarities. Even though, for example, Egyptians and our Native Americans never would have met. But they have a lot of similarities and a lot of global beliefs that are shared between each culture. Even though they never met, they still got these same beliefs and similarities. So whenever I talk about cultures, I always try to mention what other cultures might also have these same beliefs, just to kind of get y'all thinking more about that global aspect. So basically the question was, would I ever go more in depth on global similarities between cultures? And yeah, I would love to. I would just have to make a whole video kind of going back and repeating a lot of what we already talked about. I'd have to pretty much revisit some topics that we've already done. So there would be a lot of repetition if I did that. But I'd be able to go a little bit more in depth, spend a lot more time on it. So definitely something we could do. I love talking about ancient cultures, especially with our Native Americans. And again, that's probably definitely going to be something we revisit. It's just something we're going to have to kind of repeat. Another question that I got, and this question I got through an email. I said that YouTube wasn't really working, and it's not. But I have gotten a lot of different emails from people that have watched those videos. And this one was a question from my first video that we did. And basically, they were just asking, because the first video was pottery. And basically, they were just asking, I'll just read off how they asked it. Hey, we watched your first video, and I could really tell that you had a lot of passion about pottery. Is that your only hobby that you have passion about? And is there any other hobbies like pottery that you could do videos on? Uh, yes. Pottery's not the only hobby I have. It is my biggest passion. I love doing pottery. But I have a lot more hobbies, and I'm pretty passionate about them too. One of them that I'm pretty passionate about, that I'm thinking about doing a video on, is scuba diving. More specifically, I'm really wanting to do a video on treasure diving. Kind of show off some of the, well, not really show off, but show some of the stuff that I found during treasure diving. And just kind of talk about the steps that you take in treasure diving, the do's and the don'ts. It really wouldn't be scientific or anything. I just think it'd be kind of fun to talk about. But that topic completely depends on you guys, because I know that a lot of y'all like it a lot better when I talk about the scientific or the historical stuff, which is fine by me. But the scuba diving thing might be kind of a topic we visit in the future. Last question that I'm going to read off before we get into today's topic was, and I'm kind of surprised on this because I've done 2 videos where we talked about the effigies, and I'm still getting really awesome questions about it. So we're probably going to have a part 3 and a part 4 just on effigies and animalistic spiritualism in our philosophy. I'll answer that in just a second. But we're probably going to have a part 3 and a 4 on the animal spiritualism and the effigies in our indigenous people, just because I've been getting a lot of questions on them. But the question that I got this week was it strictly animals that they would carve? And the last video that we had, the previous one before this one, I briefly mentioned, and I didn't go into detail on it, but I briefly mentioned that sometimes when when the Native Americans or indigenous tribes are making effigies like this, animals are a big focus because it channels the spirit of that deity or that animal. But no, they would very oftentimes carve actual humanoid figures, just kind of talking about everyday life. Written language really wasn't a thing in a lot of our indigenous tribes. Now, that's not to say our indigenous tribes did not have written language. We have the Egyptians, Mayans, Aztecs. They had written language, but some of them didn't. And most of their communication was done in person or through some kind of carvings or stuff left behind. But whenever you find figures like this, they would often be gifts. Let's say that, for example, this effigy. And before I say this, what I'm going to say, take it with a grain of salt. Because this effigy that I'm talking about right here, what I'm saying right now is not the story for this effigy. This is just an example. But, because I honestly don't know the story to this one right here. But this is just an example. So, an example of finding an effigy like this would be perhaps this member of the tribe went out and caught the biggest fish that tribe has ever seen. And it fed them for weeks, months, however many days. So, to celebrate that, they would carve a figure, just like this, in the likeness of that person. And it would be to honor them. They would also carve humanoid figure effigies as gifts to other tribe chiefs, as kind of gifts and stuff like that. So, to answer their question, no, it wasn't just animals. They made carvings of a lot of different stuff. Animals were just one of the biggest ones, and the ones that we most commonly find. But because I've been getting so many questions on the effigies and stuff like that, there's probably going to be a part 3, maybe a part 4. I don't know yet. We'll see if I get any more questions on the effigies and the carvings. But, Cree, what's up, dude? You had a question. What's up, Corbin? Do you also talk about philosophy? I've gotten this question before, and I am very opinionated on philosophy. So, probably not. And the reason for that, I'm not saying philosophy is a bad thing. Not at all. There are some awesome people that talk about philosophy. My opinion on it, though, isn't a strong enough opinion to do a full program on it. Now, I will mention and talk about other tribes and historical philosophies that might have led an entire group of people to making a decision. I might talk about that, but I'm not going to really talk about modern day philosophical thoughts and stuff like that, just because, to me, it's way too open-ended for interpretation. And while that's not a bad thing, it's really hard to do a full program on something that is so open-ended and doesn't have a definite answer. So that might be something that I'll talk about if I'm able to relate it to some kind of science or historical happening. But I'm not just going to talk about a philosophy straight out. No. In the future, if enough people want it, yes, I will research it and do a program on it. But otherwise, probably not. Alright, if there aren't any more questions though, and I'll give you guys just a minute to think of any questions if you have, so I can enjoy my tea. And if you haven't looked at it yet, I said that I'm wanting this video series to eventually evolve into an actual, like, full-on podcast show type deal. And if you haven't already, check out the Facebook post I made, because I'm serious about this. Originally, this was just a fun distraction so that I can still do programming, get that itch, and to kind of get rid of a lot of the negativity on social media, because there was a whole mess of it, especially earlier this month. It was crazy. So originally, I was just doing this to distract people and have fun. Fallen in love with it, and it's going to turn into an actual thing. I'm dead set on that. I just have to figure out what I'm going to do. I like Facebook Live. The only thing I don't like about Facebook Live, it's not as fun for me to sit here in front of the camera and talk on Facebook Live if not enough people are joining to use the chat, which that's what Facebook Live is really, that's what makes Facebook Live what it is. So I'm eventually going to move this and do both Facebook Live, but also do some kind of podcast, maybe Spotify, I don't know yet. It's going to be something I'm going to have to research when I have more time. But the reason I said all this, Deidre made me an awesome little kind of icon, cover image, whatever you want to call it, for this show. So it's going to happen eventually. I just have to figure out how to do it. I'm not really picky where I do it, because I'm just doing this for fun. I'm not trying to make money, get famous, get popular, whatever. I'm really just doing this for fun, because it's really, really enjoyable. But if y'all don't have any questions, we're going to go on with today's topic. And today's topic, we're both revisiting an older topic and starting something new. And usually whenever I do these videos, I have stuff out on the table related to the topic. And you just can't see it because they're kind of flat. But for today's topic, I said we're going to revisit and have a new one. We're going to be talking more about brews. And I'm not going to keep saying brews. I'm just going to say tea. But before we get started, here's what I really want you guys to realize. Back then, the stuff that we're about to talk about, they were never called tea. Tea was not a word for it. They were either called tonic or they were called brews. Because while today, and the tea that I made today is an example of this, nowadays, this is just a nice, leisurely, kind of casual tea. It's just something you would drink every day. Back then, you would not drink this unless you needed it medicinally. This was not you just sit down, have fun, drink this tea. This was strictly medicinal. You would only drink this if you needed something cured. But, so, they weren't always called teas. They were called brews, tonics. There's a lot of different words for them, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say teas. But we're going to talk about a few different ones today. And sadly, I only had examples for two, some physical aids for two of them. But we're going to talk about a few more. And what's really cool is if you trace these back, if you trace all these different brews and tonics and teas back and really research them, you're going to find two places that they really originate from. And at first, I'm going to be honest, and this might sound really stereotypical of me, and I don't mean to offend anybody by saying this, but when I first started researching this topic, I honestly thought a lot of these were going to originate from England, or, the surrounding area, because they're very popular for tea. Now, I knew that two of them, for sure, did not come from England. But a few of these, I was surprised to find out, did not originate from England. The two main places that you're going to find teas, especially some of our modern day teas, are either Japan or Native American type cultures. And this is where I said we're going to revisit, because it seems every video I talk about something Native American, and it's not always on purpose. You can trace so much back to indigenous tribes or Native American. So, no matter what topic I talk about, it always seems to go back to them. So, I promise, I'm not just trying to beat a dead horse and bring up Native Americans every video. So much can just be traced back to them. But, our Native Americans and Japan, ancient Japan, are to thank for a lot of what we call our modern day teas, which back then were brews and tonics. Now, the two that I'm going to talk about first have really cool historical significance. And the first one I want to talk about is this little guy right here. And again, I'm not sure how well this shows up on camera. For me, it shows up pretty good. But if you can't tell what it is, this is your Eastern white pine. And this little guy right here had incredible historical significance. And while history does not directly say that this plant, this tree, the Eastern white pine, had a huge impact on us being here, it might have, because this tea, the Eastern White Pine Tonic, goes all the way back to Lewis and Clark. And in fact, if you research this, and if you look into Lewis and Clark talking about the white pine, you can even find, or at least I have found, writings and talks and quotes saying that this brew saved their life a few times. So, in my honest opinion, I'm not a historian. I know enough history to talk about stuff. I appreciate history and I respect it. But I'm not one of those that's going to go like super deep in history and fact check every little thing. So, in my honest opinion, as somebody that's researched this, I do believe that the Eastern White Pine might have had incredible significance. Because of Lewis and Clark saying it saved their lives, I believe this had a huge impact on why we eventually came here, the early settlement periods. Now, the reason that this saved their lives, we're going to kind of talk about a little story real quick. They did a lot of their traveling by water. Now, yes, they did walk around a lot, but you're not going to be able to walk around everywhere. So a lot of times they would have to go by water. And early on, a huge problem that people had just traveling by water was scurvy. Scurvy was a huge problem. And usually when we hear scurvy, we hear about it in pirate times. And now that I brought up pirates, that's going to be an awesome topic for a future video. So look forward to that. That'll be really fun. But what we find is that scurvy is usually always related to pirates, but it affected anybody that traveled by water for an extended amount of time. Now, it eventually got so bad for them that they had to cut their travel short, scope out an island, camp, and try to rest up. And on that island, they met an indigenous tribe, one of our tribes of Native Americans. And the reason I'm not saying a specific tribe is because I researched this on a few different historical sites and books, and they all had different theories on what the tribe was. For some reason, all the different iterations of this story had a different kind of tribe. I don't know why that is. I'm going to be talking with one of my historical friends, one of my good friends here, pretty shortly, and see if he might know the definite answer. But for now, we're just going to say indigenous tribe, or Native American tribes. They ran into a Native American tribe, and pretty much, depending on what iteration you look for, some say they were friendly, some say they were not. We don't know. But according to the story, they found this tribe and they needed help. They didn't know anything about this land. They had just got here, and they just got here to camp and rest. So Lewis and Clark went and talked to this tribe and was basically like, look, we're sick. Whatever y'all can do to help us would be awesome. So they told Lewis and Clark, the Native Americans did, to go out and look for this specific tree and bring back some of the needles. Now, they specifically warned them, only bring back needles from a tree that are no longer than your finger and have 5 needles. I don't know why I held up 4 fingers, but 5 needles per bundle. So they said, okay. They went out and they found it. They brought them back. And what these leaves were leaves from the eastern white pine. And the number of needles and the length is really important, so keep that in mind as we're going forward, because I am going to explain why that was a really important detail. But they brought those needles back to the tribe, and the tribe's medicine man, rather, or shaman, depending on, how you read into this, made them a potion or a brew. And he brewed these leaves in the water, boiled it, added a few spices, and basically made a modern day tea. And pine tea, this is a tea you can buy at Walmart now. It's a pretty good tea. It's not very strong, but it's not a tea that you would want to sip on every day. This one, it is pretty. We'll explain it in a second, but because I'm not gonna be able to say it without giggling. But basically, the Native American medicine man brewed their tea with the eastern white pine needles and gave it to them. And what this did, and here's why I said don't drink abundances of this if you do go out and get it, it completely flushed out their system. It is a very purifying and detoxifying tea, but what they found is it cured scurvy. And this is where I said that according to what I've researched, they were quoted as saying, if not for this tea, they would have had to cut a lot of their travel short, and they might have even died. So, Eastern White Pine might have had a huge impact on our history because it was used in that tea, that potion as they called it, the tonic, the brew. Bunch of different words we could use for it, but was never called a tea. The reason that we call it a tea now is because teas are first made from boiling water. Then you add in some kind of leaf, some kind of herb. Excuse me. And that's why we would call it a tea now, because of the way it's prepped. But to them, this was medicine. And when you really look into this, there's a lot more than we could talk about in one video. But remember I said that the needles was an important detail, because there's a bunch of other pine trees that kind of look like the eastern white pine, but are toxic. One of those is the loblolly and hemlock. Those are used for poisons. They are not one you would want to drink, but the eastern white pine is a huge medicinal. It went so far as to saying that not only could it help with scurvy, but it cured nausea, headaches, cramps. It had a multitude of uses. The only side effect of it was that after you drink it, don't go eat anywhere fancy, because you're never going to leave the bathroom. It completely flushes your system, and it lasts hours. And again, it is a tea we can get nowadays. They sell it just at Walmart and other stores if you know where to look, and if you know what to look for. But that is just one example. There's another one that also came from the Native Americans, and this one carried over into the later 1800s leading into the 1900s. This one had an incredible impact not only on the medical field, but also just on drink preparation. And I'll explain that here in a minute. But early settlers were having troubles with ulcers and colds, just random sicknesses. And again, this is one of those stories. This is one of those historical stories, depending on what iteration you find. They were either nice to the Native Americans or they were mean. Interpret it how you want. But the story for this tea and the finding of it basically goes, some of the early settlers that were having troubles with this would go to some of the nearby Native Americans and basically say, hey, we're having trouble with this. Do y'all happen to know anything, any kind of like herbal medicine that might cure it that we can take back? And they were like, yeah, we know the perfect thing for cramps, stomach ulcers, colds, stuff like that. And they sent it back with them. And if you remember, we also talked about this herb during our Native American storytelling. And it's really not a herb. It is a tree, and it's sassafras. Now, on this example, I have two of the leaves. The third leaf looks just like this one, but it has a third little finger coming off on the side, so that it kind of looks like that. It has a little spike coming off right here. But sassafras is one of those trees and the plants that the Native Americans taught early settlers how to use for medicinal purposes. And we're going to talk about some of its other uses and how it really impacted the drink industry here in a minute. But basically what they told them to do is, depending on the severity of your symptoms, you're going to make sassafras tea one of two ways, or the brew one of two ways. If it's very mild symptoms, all you're going to do is go out, gather up the leaves, and you're going to let them dry out in the sun. You're going to set, and this is a tea that I've made myself, and it's actually really good. But they would have them set it out in the sun for about a day to dry out. After that, they would bring it back in. They would crumple it up, boil the water, basically just dump all that in the water, stir it around until the water turns into this really pleasant, almost kind of beer-looking color. It kind of would look like a beer, maybe a Nelly Yellow even. Just a really nice kind of... Oh, ginger ale. Ginger ale is a good example. A nice ginger ale type color. But basically, they would brew it like that, and they would tell them, you're only going to take a spoonful of this every night before you go to bed. And that's for mild symptoms. For severe symptoms, instead of taking the leaf, you take the root. Because everything that's in the leaf is a lot more potent in the root. And you would dry out the root, same way that you would the leaf. You would dice it up, boil it in the water, remove the root, and you would drink a full cup of that. And sassafras was one of those teas, again, don't drink a lot of it. And this one was even more of a detoxifier than the Eastern white pine. But it was found to cure a lot different ailments. It was a lot better. Later on, what they found, because sassafras, I don't know if you guys have ever taken a leaf and really smelt it, but if you take the leaf and kind of rub it on your fingers, it has an incredibly strong citrus smell. And they took advantage of that. They would use it for air fresheners, and later on, they found that it even had a very citrusy taste. And they put it in root beer. Some of the earliest forms of root beer is sassafras, and it was made from sassafras roots, but it was made with different types of preparation. And that became an incredibly popular drink during that period, and even now, if you know where to look, you can find some. But it had a huge impact on just the normal drinking industry. It went so far as to even making actual alcoholic beverages with sassafras, because you'd be able to feel really good afterwards and it would help some of your symptoms. So, best of both worlds, pretty much. And it also just tasted awesome. So that's another one that's just really, really popular that's carried over into modern days. But it was never called a tea. It was a tonic. It was purely medicinal until they turned it into root beer and later different types of alcoholic beverages. So that's just another example of one that came from Native Americans over into modern times. Now, I've been talking for a bit. We're not finished yet. We still have a little bit more to talk about. But I want to let y'all take this time to think about what I said and come up with any questions you might have while I check this message since it came from work. Oh, never mind, it wasn't work, so we're good. But yeah, I'm going to take this time, let y'all think of some questions you might have. And like always, guys, your questions don't have to just be about our topic. It can even be about past topics. If you have a question from a past video, you might have. And yeah, no, sassafras, it tastes just like root beer, but it has this really, really nice kind of almost lemon or lime aftertaste. It has a really awesome aftertaste, and it's really, really sweet. It's really hard to find sassafras root beer now, and most of the reason for that is because sassafras, it's not really a delicate tree, but it's super easy for other trees to outgrow it, so it's not going to mature enough to use the roots. And you really can't make the root beer out of just the leaves. That's why it's called root beer, because it was originally made with the roots of your sassafras. So sassafras root beer, really not as prominent anymore, because it's a lot easier to make modern day root beer the way that they make it, instead of having to go out and try to find and harvest sassafras. Because while it's not really an endangered tree, it's just easy to outgrow because it's pretty slow. It's pretty slow and it needs a lot of sunlight. But if nobody has any more questions, or any questions, we're going to move on. Because at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that mint I'm about to talk about here in a minute. Because mint kind of relates to the second culture that we're about to mention. But the mint, they wouldn't necessarily make their brews and their tonics and all that, their medicinals, with just mint. Mint would mostly be used to kind of get rid of that medicine taste. Now we put it in our tea just because it has a really nice kind of taste and effect on it. But back then, it was basically putting honey in a spoon to make the medicine easier. That's pretty much how it is. Because again, remember, they're not thinking of this as just a nice, normal, everyday drink. During your settlement period, and especially with your Native Americans, this was medicine. This was not just, hey, I want some tea, let's go make some. This was, I'm sick, I know that this sassafras or this white pine, this tonic, this brew is going to cure my symptoms. Let's go see if we have any in stock. If not, let's go gather some and make it real quick. It was not a casual drink. This was pure medicine. But thanks for bringing that up, because mint is something we're going to mention here in a second. But if nobody else has any questions, if you remember at the beginning of this video, I said that another one of the cultures that really influenced and impacted tea and modern day kind of brews and stuff like that was the Native Americans, and the second one was Japan. What's interesting about ancient Japan is they really wouldn't necessarily always use tea as medicinal. Now, don't get me wrong. They would have medicinal practices with their teas, just like the Native Americans and the settlers. But They took tea to a whole other level. They had entire ceremonies and rituals revolving around just the drinking of tea. And the reason for that, there's a few different reasons, but kind of my favorite reason to talk about because it's a lot easier to understand and I don't have to get into some of the political aspects of it, is tea comes from the earth. It's not something that's man made. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. The stuff that you need to make tea comes from the earth. That stuff is not man made, it's nature, it's grown. We do make the tea. The tea itself is man made. The materials needed for it are not man made. That's what I meant to say. But to them, anything that came from the earth that you put into your body was, and the Native Americans had some of this belief too, but the Japanese, they took it to a whole other level. It was kind of a spiritual and ritualistic. And it's kind of like connecting yourself to the earth in a sense. But some of the teas that they had that really influenced modern day medicine, or not really modern day medicine, excuse me, modern day brews, they would make teas out of pretty much everything. And they experimented a lot with brews and tonics and teas as well. The sakura tree is, or not the sakura tree, the sakura leaf from in the cherry blossom tree. Something very, very well known. It's in modern day pop culture. You see it all over the place. When you think of Japan, the pink cherry blossoms are usually the first thing that come to mind. They're all over Washington, D.C. Those trees were not just pretty and decorative. Or those trees, not those teas. Those trees were not just pretty and decorative. That tree had an incredible impact on Japanese drink and food. Because they found that the leaf and the flower petal from that tree had an incredible multitude of uses. The leaf could be made into different trees. You could just chew on it if you wanted to. It could be made into flour. They would combine the flower petals and the leaves to make actual flour and bake with it. The flower petal would even just be eaten raw or wrapped up into something. You could put rice in the middle and wrap it up and eat it. They went crazy with this tree. But what they really found was it was awesome in tea. It had a really nice kind of tangy flavor. And mint as well. Mint was almost always put in it. And for them, and this is the only reason, this is probably my favorite reason, because it's not really funny, but it's also kind of funny to think about. It was hygienic. You would have your tea ritual. You would put whatever you wanted in it. And that mint was kind of a breath freshener. It was hygienic. So that you wouldn't stink as bad. But it's really cool. And for them, for the Japanese, it was a tea. It wasn't just a tonic. But they did do a lot of herbal medicine. But herbal medicine was mostly influenced by the Native Americans. I just wanted to mention the Japanese because they're one of them that kind of flopped back and forth between, okay, this is a tonic and herbal medicine. No, this is a tea. Let's just drink it and have fun. They kind of flip-flop it back and forth between the two different beliefs. All right. That is pretty much all I had for you guys today. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If y'all have any questions, like always, I'm going to leave the stream up for a few minutes to give y'all time to type any questions. And if y'all don't, then I'll mention what the next topic is probably going to be. Or if y'all even have any comments, stories of your own, just something you want to say, or ideas for a future topic, put it in the chat. Put whatever you want in the chat, honestly. I'll give y'all just a few minutes, just so I'm not sitting here looking at myself. But while I'm letting y'all think of questions, comments, or anything, I'll go ahead and mention what the next topic is going to be. I'm either going to go into kind of I kind of want to do an amateur archaeology type thing, like how to do your own type of archaeology stuff, archaeological things that you can do with the kids, activities. I kind of want to do that, but I also kind of want to do a topic on pirates, possibly. I think that'd be really fun to talk about, because pirates kind of got romanticized in a lot of pop culture and modern day media. I don't know. I have to think on what the next topic is going to be unless somebody gives me a good idea. But I don't see any questions, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're watching this video at a later time, just while it's posted on Facebook, you can still leave a comment, leave a question, send me a message if you want to. You don't have to be at the live video to leave me anything. But if y'all have any ideas for a future topic or a topic you might want to see, send me a message, leave a comment. Same thing if you have any questions. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Thank y'all.